It's a memory that feels less like a memory and more like a splinter, lodged deep under the skin of my mind. Most of my childhood recollections are hazy, bathed in the warm, fuzzy light of nostalgia, but not this one. This one is sharp, cold, and its edges are still keen enough to draw blood after all these years. I don't usually share this kind of thing with many people. It's too strange, too raw. But those who enjoy hearing stories like this understand how some experiences just keep haunting your thoughts, demanding to be re-examined in the dead of night. If you're into this too, make sure to subscribe. It really helps me keep sharing stories like this here, pulling them out from the dark corners where they fester. The story begins, as so many do, with the simple, pure excitement of a 10-year-old. It was a Friday afternoon in late autumn, and I was packed and ready for a weekend sleepover at my best friend Leo's house. His home was my second home, a place of comforting predictability. I knew the exact number of steps from my front door to his, the specific creak the third step of his porch made, the familiar scent of Mrs. Gable's rose bushes that lined the walkway. The air was crisp and carried the smell of distant wood smoke, a perfect prelude to a weekend of video games, junk food, and staying up way too late telling ghost stories. Little did I know, I was about to walk into one. I rang the doorbell, my duffel bag slung over my shoulder, my heart buzzing with anticipation. I could already picture Leo's mom, Mrs. Gable, opening the door with her wide, crinkly smile, probably with a smudge of flour on her cheek. I could hear the frantic scrabbling of their golden retriever, Buster, on the other side of the door, ready to greet me with unrestrained joy. But when the lock clicked and the door swung inward, the person standing there was not Mrs. Gable. It was a woman I had never seen before, with tired eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them. Behind her, a man who was not Mr. Gable watched me with a hollow, placid expression. The world, for a moment, stopped making sense. Leo was more than just a friend. He was the other half of my childhood. We were inseparable, navigating the treacherous waters of elementary school with a bond forged over shared comic books, scraped knees, and a mutual understanding that the world was a far more interesting place when explored together. His house was the default headquarters for all our adventures, a safe haven where the rules felt a little looser than at my own home. I knew the secret hiding spots in his closet, the loose floorboard in the hallway to avoid at night, and which of his action figures were his absolute favorites. Our friendship was built on a foundation of 1,000 tiny, shared details, and his family, his home, were as much a part of that foundation as he was. My familiarity with his life wasn't casual. It was deeply ingrained. His real parents were the Gables, and they were the epitome of warmth. Mrs. Gable was a gentle soul who always seemed to be baking something delicious. The scent of cinnamon and sugar was a permanent fixture in their kitchen. She had a soft, melodic laugh, and always made me feel just as welcome as her own son. Mr. Gable was a large man with a booming voice and a hearty laugh that could shake the windows. He'd often join us for a round of video games, pretending to be comically bad at them just to make us feel like champions. And then there was Buster, their goofy, slobbery golden retriever who was a constant furry shadow, always nudging a tennis ball into your hand. They were a fixture, a constant, the sun around which Leo's happy world revolved. The Gable house itself was a landscape I had memorized, a cozy two-story home with blue shutters and a slightly overgrown lawn that Mr. Gable was always meaning to mow. Inside it was a comfortable clutter of life, a stack of newspapers by the armchair, a collection of mismatched mugs in the kitchen, and most importantly, the gallery of family photos on the living room mantel. There were pictures of Leo as a baby, school portraits, and a large central photo from a family vacation at the beach, with Mr. and Mrs. Gable laughing, their arms wrapped around a sun-drenched Leo with Buster digging in the sand at their feet. That mantel was the heart of the home, a testament to their shared history, a history I felt I was a part of. The strange woman's smile was a practiced, hollow thing. "Alex, we're so glad you could make it," she said, and hearing my own name from her mouth sent a jolt of ice through my veins. It wasn't a question. They knew who I was. Her voice was too high, too thin, nothing like the warm, melodic tone of Mrs. Gable. She reached out and placed a hand on my shoulder to guide me inside, and her touch was cold, even through my jacket. I flinched, my eyes darting past her into the dim hallway, desperately searching for a familiar face, for the comforting sight of Leo. My brain was screaming, wrong house, wrong people, but my feet were frozen to the porch, caught between the instinct to flee and the paralyzing confusion of the moment. The man behind her just watched, his face a complete blank. Just as I was about to stammer out a question, Leo appeared from the living room, a wide, happy grin on his face. "Alex, you're here," he shouted, completely oblivious to the silent alarm bells ringing in my head. He ran to the door and gave me a quick, friendly shove. "Come on in. You remember my mom and dad, right?" My stomach plummeted. I stared at him, then at the strangers, then back at him, expecting him to burst out laughing at any second, to reveal the punchline. I tried to play along, forcing a nervous chuckle. "Very funny, Leo. Where are your real parents?" His smile vanished instantly, replaced by a look of profound confusion and a flicker of hurt that felt horrifyingly genuine. "What are you talking about?" "They're right here." The woman's hand tightened on my shoulder, gently but firmly pulling me over the threshold. The man stepped aside, and the heavy front door clicked shut behind me. The sound was deafeningly final, a metallic thud that sealed me inside with them. The hallway smelled different, not of cinnamon but of some cloying artificial air freshener. I looked at Leo, my eyes pleading with him to drop the act, to give me a sign, a wink, anything. But there was nothing. He just looked at me with that same wounded expression, as if I had just said the cruelest thing in the world. And the two strangers stood there, flanking the hallway, their faces patient, their eyes watching my every move, waiting for me to accept their impossible reality. I was trapped. The woman, Leo's supposed mother, led us into the living room. At first glance, it was the same room I had spent hundreds of hours in, but a creeping sense of wrongness prickled at my skin. The comfortable, slightly worn armchair Mr. Gable always sat in was gone, replaced by a stiff, modern-looking love seat. The faded floral wallpaper had been painted over with a dull, sterile beige. "You painted?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, pointing at the wall. The man chuckled softly. "Painted? Son, that wall has been beige for as long as we've lived here." Leo nodded in agreement, looking at me as if I'd grown a second head. They were a united front, calmly and systematically dismantling my memories, making me feel like I was the one who was broken, not the world around me. Dinner was a quiet, tense affair. The food was bland and unfamiliar, nothing like the hearty meals Mrs. Gable used to cook. The man insisted on a strange rule where we had to name something we were grateful for before eating. It felt rehearsed and unnatural. Halfway through the meal, unable to bear the silence and the constant, unnerving smiles, I asked the question that had been burning in my mind. "Where's Buster?" The woman's smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "Buster? I'm not sure who that is," she said. The man added, "We've never had a dog, Alex. Leo is allergic." I stared at Leo, who was pointedly avoiding my gaze, pushing peas around his plate. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else has ever been through something like this. That's why I keep sharing these stories here. If you enjoy these strange accounts too, subscribe. It gives me strength to keep bringing more. After dinner, while Leo was showing me a new video game, I couldn't shake the feeling. I excused myself and walked as if in a trance to the fireplace mantel. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a frantic drum of dread. I scanned the photos, my eyes searching for the familiar, smiling faces of the Gables. They were all gone. In the center, where the beach photo used to be, was a new picture in the same silver frame. It was Leo, sandwiched between these two strangers, all of them wearing forced, bright smiles. He was wearing a shirt I'd never seen before. It was proof, tangible, undeniable proof. "This isn't real," I said, my voice cracking as I pointed at the photo. "Who are you?" Leo burst into tears, accusing me of being mean and trying to ruin our sleepover. Later, huddled in our sleeping bags on Leo's bedroom floor, the tension was suffocating. The cheerful posters on his walls seemed to mock me. I waited until the lights were out and the house was quiet before leaning over to him. "Leo, please," I whispered, my voice trembling in the darkness. "You have to tell me what's going on. Where are your mum and dad?" He didn't answer at first, and I thought maybe he was finally going to break, to tell me the truth. Instead, he just started to cry, soft, terrified sobs. "You're scaring me, Alex," he whimpered. "They're my parents. Please stop." Downstairs, I could hear the floorboards creaking as one of them moved about the house, a sleepless predator patrolling its territory. I was utterly alone. Sleep was an impossibility. I lay perfectly still in my sleeping bag, my eyes wide open in the suffocating darkness, listening to the alien rhythm of the house, every creak of the floorboards, Every groan of the pipes was a potential threat, the sound of one of them coming to check on us. The fear that had been a cold knot in my stomach had now morphed into a frantic, desperate energy. I couldn't stay here until morning. I couldn't face another meal, another conversation, another moment of pretending. My mind settled on a single, terrifyingly clear objective. I had to get out. I had to run, find a phone, call my parents, tell someone what was happening. My escape was no longer a choice. It felt like a matter of survival. After what felt like an eternity, the subtle sounds of the house finally settled into a deep, consistent silence. It was now or never. I carefully unzipped my sleeping bag, the sound like a roar in the quiet room. I held my breath, but Leo didn't stir. He was curled on his side, his breathing soft and even, a picture of untroubled sleep that was more disturbing than any nightmare. Moving with the painstaking slowness of a bomb disposal expert, I rose to my feet. The floor was cold against my bare soles. I tiptoed across the room, my muscle memory guiding me around the one floorboard near the door that always squeaked. The hallway was a corridor of shadows, and every step was a gamble. I made it to the ground floor, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The kitchen was bathed in the pale, ghostly light of the moon, which streamed through the window over the sink. It made the familiar shapes of the counters and table look menacing and strange. But there it was, my salvation. The back door. It was only a few feet away, a dark rectangle promising a return to the real world, to sanity. I crept towards it, my hand outstretched, my fingers trembling as they brushed against the cold metal of the deadbolt. I could almost feel the crisp night air on my face, the rough grass of the backyard under my feet. Freedom was one simple metallic click away. Just as my fingers closed around the lock, a sound from the living room froze me in place. It wasn't a creak or a footstep. It was the sound of weeping. A soft, muffled, and utterly heartbroken sound. It was the woman, the one Leo called Mom. My escape plan evaporated, instantly replaced by a morbid, irresistible pull. My fear was still there, but it was now secondary to a powerful, burning need to understand what I was hearing. This wasn't the sound of a monster or a kidnapper. It was the sound of pure, undiluted grief, against all logic, against every self-preservation instinct screaming at me to run. I found myself slowly, silently, turning away from the door and toward the darkness of the living room. I peered around the edge of the doorway, my body hidden in the shadows of the hall. There on the couch were two silhouettes against the faint moonlight. It was the man and the woman. He was holding her as she cried into his shoulder, his hand stroking her back in a slow, comforting rhythm. Their rigid, unnerving daytime personas had completely dissolved, replaced by a vulnerability so raw, it felt like I was intruding on something sacred. They were not watching, not waiting, not pretending. They were simply two people clinging to each other in the dark, overwhelmed by a sorrow so immense it seemed to suck all the air out of the room. I was no longer afraid of them. I was afraid for them. My ears strained to catch their whispered words, which were fractured by the woman's sobs. "He called me Mom again today," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "He did it all on his own without me having to remind him." There was a brief pause, and then her voice broke completely. "But then, just before bed, he asked me where Buster was. He hasn't asked about the dog in weeks, Robert. I thought he was forgetting." The name Buster shot through me like a lightning bolt. It was real. The dog was real. My memory was real. For a fleeting second, I felt a surge of validation, quickly extinguished by the profound sadness in her voice. The man, Robert, let out a long, weary sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire world. "The doctor said this would happen, Sarah," he said, his own voice low and heavy with exhaustion. "She said there would be good days and bad days, moments of clarity. We can't let it discourage us." He paused, his voice dropping even lower, filled with a pain that was terrifying in its depth. "It's only been 2 months since the accident. We just have to be strong for him. We have to keep their world as safe as we can for as long as he needs us to." And in that single devastating moment, the entire nightmare rearranged itself into a tragedy. The word accident echoed in the silent house, and with it came the horrific, unspoken truth. The Gables, Mr. and Mrs. Gable, with their warm smiles and booming laughs, were gone. Buster was gone. It wasn't a kidnapping, it wasn't a sinister plot. These strangers were not imposters. They were his aunt and uncle or some other family, left to pick up the pieces of a shattered little boy's life. The modified house, the missing photos, the denial of the dog, it wasn't gaslighting aimed at me. It was a desperate, heartbreaking attempt to build a new reality around Leo, a fragile sanctuary, to protect his mind from a truth it simply couldn't handle. The horror wasn't what was happening in the house, but what had already happened before I ever arrived. I didn't escape that night. The thought of running, of exposing their fragile, tragic secret, felt like an act of profound cruelty. I crept away from the living room doorway, the weight of their grief pressing down on me, and tiptoed back to Leo's room. Lying in my sleeping bag again, the house felt entirely different. It was no longer a prison of psychological horror, but a quiet, hollow mausoleum dedicated to a family that no longer existed. The darkness was no longer filled with menace, but with an immense, suffocating sadness. I lay awake for hours, listening to the silence, no longer a child on a fun sleepover, but a silent mourner at a wake I had stumbled into by accident. The game was over, and the reality was infinitely more terrifying. The next morning, I played my part. When Sarah, I now knew her name was Sarah, offered me pancakes, I smiled and said, "Thank you, Mrs. Gable." The look she gave me was not one of triumph or deception, but of such deep, aching and desperate gratitude that it still makes my throat tighten to remember it. It was a silent acknowledgement, a shared burden between a grieving woman and a terrified 10-year-old. When my real mother arrived to pick me up, I was silent for the entire car ride home. She kept asking if I had a good time, and I just nodded. How could I possibly explain? How could I tell her that my best friend's parents were dead, but that he didn't know it, and that I had spent the night in a house haunted not by ghosts, but by love and denial? Leo and I drifted apart after that. The secret I carried was a chasm between us that I could never cross. I don't know if he ever fully came back from that fractured reality his mind had built, or if he slowly pieced together the truth of the accident. The memory of that night never faded. It remains a cold, sharp reminder that the most unsettling horrors aren't about monsters in the dark, but about the desperate, fragile ways the human heart tries to protect itself from breaking. I don't know if I'll ever fully understand what happened, but as long as these stories keep haunting me, I'll keep sharing them here. If you want to hear more, subscribe. It really helps keep this space alive.